everything about this drove me a little bit nuts.
Yeah, I mean, it should. On the Disney part, I think it's so funny that they own themselves by having to now raise property taxes to hundreds of millions of dollars by taxing those populations.
I mean, I guess the only thing you could say is that those counties where Disney's located are mostly blue.
Yes.
So like maybe they don't care.
It's kind of like the SALT repeal. It's
maybe they don't care that it's but it's still like definitely not the way that it's being portrayed. And ultimately also I read it's not even going to go into effect for like a year. So you could also very easily see them like working out some deal down the road where none of this even actually happens.
I think they'll figure it out. I do got to say, and I'll stick up for the right-wing listener base of this, I don't think this is an attack on gay people. And I just think that framing it that way is just not the right way.
Of course it is.
It's really
You think that there's going to be lawsuits over if some straight teacher talks about their like heterosexual marriage? Of course not.
I think the impetus of the bill is about teachers. In terms of the extent of this, Libs of TikTok possibly made it larger than it is, but like there are teachers and nurses which are, pushing trans ideology with young kids, which parents don't necessarily want their kids to be taught about. Now, look, should I think the nation's attention should...
First of all, just to break in real quick, I don't want to interrupt this constantly. I want to let you guys listen to the full exchange, but it is interesting. What is trans ideology? Like, trans people exist. They have existed all throughout human history, going back hundreds and hundreds of years. This is a well-documented historical fact. Trans people are a thing. They always have been a thing. They always will be a thing, just like gay people. What is trans ideology? Is that acknowledging the reality of the human experience? Like, I don't really understand what that even means.
That gives away the whole thing, right? And I 100%, that gives away his entire premise here, where he's like, it's not about gay, it's about the trans ideology. It's because it's not safe anymore for Republicans to come out here and be like, I fucking hate these disgusting gay fucking predators, like they did in the 70s and 80s, and they shat all over the gay community.
Or the 2010s.
Or the 2000s, or everything, or still now on Fox News, where they're pretending that every single time a person discusses their husband or a teacher is like, hey, it's okay to be gay, like even if your parents don't love you, because maybe you didn't grow up in an area where people literally would freak the fuck out, disown you, threaten to not pay for your college if you were affluent, or like do things to manipulate you and extort you into not being with people that you love and are interested in. And now that's it. It's the new safe way to do that is to just exclusively channel all of that derision and all of that prejudice into the and bigotry into the fucking trans argument 100%. And you're 100% here that this trans ideology is just this idea that, oh, we should not persecute and eliminate trans people from our fucking society and force them to live inauthentic lives. That is that's the trans ideology that he's so railing against, and it just forces it's one of those rare times where I have to like sit back and remember that through all the agreements that we have with Saagar, this is one of those fundamental things where it's like, if you do not get on board with defending every single one of our allies, regardless of who they are, making sure that they have equal access to liberty as all of us, this is 100% going to be used to single out trans people who are already extremely vulnerable, and it will be expanded to single out gay people or people who are gender ambiguous or non-conforming.
Do we focus on that? No. Is it largely a limited instance with these teachers? Yes.
But
I don't think it's about.
The thing.
It's not about a burger.
I mean, so many times though we've talked about how dishonest it is to find one example of saying something cringy, and then make it like, oh, this is a whole thing, and they're creating a moral panic. And it is specifically, as you said, about gay people and about trans people.
Well, I don't think it's about gay people. I think it's about trans ideology amongst young kids.
No, but that's
the key.
And also, here's the other issue: is like, sex ed is already illegal.
Well, then why are these parents teaching? This is the problem. Why are these K-5? Why are
so, like, what is this ultimately about?
Anyway?
It's about culture war.
I don't disagree, but I mean, there are instances of kindergarten teachers like pushing trans ideology amongst these.
What do you mean
kids.
by pushing trans ideology?
So they're like,
that's the other thing that's really disgusting and pernicious about this is being like, if you're trans, ergo, or you're talking about this at all, ergo you're grooming kids,
100%.
which is disgusting, and that's part of what this.
Okay, so first of all, if Saagar agrees that that's disgusting, then why isn't he regularly calling out his side of the political spectrum for constantly engaging in this rhetoric, especially as of late? If he agrees that it's disgusting to call trans people and to call gay people or LGBT folks in general predators or groomers, then Saagar needs to, really call out his own side, call out the right wing, because that's like dominating the discourse right now. And if you're going to devote whole radars to how the left is anti-health and anti-exercise, then maybe you could do a radar calling out your own goddamn side for being disgustingly bigoted, so much so that it actually does have real-world violent impacts on these already disenfranchised, already marginalized communities. You think this rhetoric is just memes online? No, this is like life or death. Like, this is serious fucking issues for, again, groups that are already marginalized by society in a serious way and have been for all of American history. Within the last, like, what, 10, 15 years, gay marriage was legalized. But now there's this increased anti-gay sentiment coming from the right wing. You see this rearing its head a lot lately, and it's honestly mind-blowing to watch because, again, I thought we were so far beyond this as a society. But no, the right wing is thoroughly, on board with this. LGBT folks are groomers. Gay parents shouldn't be able to have kids because they're predators. Trans people are perverted and predatory, etc. This should be called out, Saagar. You absolutely should be calling this out, especially because you claim to not care about the culture war as much as other more important issues. You constantly talk about how culture war issues are distracting from the real issues and that they're dividing this country. Then I do think it's incumbent on you to call out your side for not only engaging in the culture war constantly, but again, literally endangering the lives of marginalized communities in this country by spreading this disgusting and bigoted talking points about groomers and predatory behavior coming from people that, by the way, don't even commit the most predatory offenses. Straight men are the majority of child molesters and predators, not gay people, not trans people. Trans people are normal human beings just like myself, just like other straight people. It's really not that hard. And it's crazy that in the year 2022, we're still stuck in this rut. We're still having this discussion about like basic civil rights.
Yeah, and he refuses to pin down what he is talking about when he says, well, we have kindergartners that are being indoctrinated with trans ideology. Like, and then she's like, well, what does that mean? And then he immediately, I can already tell what he was going to pivot to was nurses in schools that are going to be giving like estrogen blockers and testosterone. I'm like, find me 5 fucking examples about that and do a fucking radar about it then, Saagar. Like, stop just pulling these random examples that are going to get debunked out of your ass. Where in this country does a school nurse prescribe medication? It's a different fucking doctor, Saagar. When did you can't even get fucking ibuprofen from your school nurse unless your parents sign a document, goddammit. Like, this is a complete non-argument. You literally go to a different doctor that has nothing to do with your school. And you want to talk about how parents have the right to have health control over their own body, Saagar? Why can't a fucking parent take their kid to any kind of doctor that they goddamn please? So that's my first fucking argument right there. 2, this idea that, trans indoctrination of children. Are you saying that it should be illegal for a trans woman or a trans man to become a kindergarten teacher? How the fuck are they going to explain who they are and their own identity and their own background and their own fucking lives? That's above the fucking head of a child. No, it's not. If I was a woman and I was teaching a kindergarten class and I told them about my weekend with my husband and my kids or whatever the fuck, that would be completely normal. And if I did that as a trans woman or a trans man and I was authentic to myself, and whatever, and maybe it wouldn't even come up that they were trans, right? Maybe it never would. But if it did, is that something that they could be fired for just articulating who they are and what their life experience has been? 100 years ago, it's like, well, like, wouldn't this have you could have done this? I shouldn't have a Jewish teacher if you're that Catholic, so I don't want my kids being exposed to this. Like, I don't want a Muslim teacher for my kid, they're too young to be exposed to all this. We wouldn't tolerate any of that. But somehow, because trans people are okay to bash and to diminish and to strip rights away from, this is the one time where it's okay because this is a radical leftist ideology, and you can you don't even have to be a fucking leftist to be a trans person, right? I mean, that's even a false dichotomy to be like, all trans people are leftists. Look at fucking Caitlyn Jenner, she's a fucking Republican, dude. Blair White is a fucking Republican. I didn't even know Blair White was trans until somebody pointed out to me. I was just watching her fucking disgusting ass commentary. So you can have all kinds of vile views and be a trans people. Guess what? They're people too, right? So it's like a non-issue. You can't. There's no way to argue around that. Besides, I am a bigot and I don't want my kids to be around these other different kinds of people.
This is all about. I mean, his own communications director tweeted out something to that effect. Chris Rufo was in the page of the New York Times basically making that case right now.
So when I say pushing trans ideology, I'm not talking about making, you're a teacher and you're like, hey, my pronouns are they, them. I believe in a free country. You do whatever you want. I'm talking about, and again, I don't even like delving into this stuff, but like the transition closets, you have nurses which are pushing hormones on the young kids and telling them not to mention it to their parents. You have like GSA clubs popping in with, like young children, and they're saying like, we're going to protect this from the parents and not tell them about what's happening. I think the policy should be, you If as a child, if you want to explore whatever you want, you should talk to your parents about it. We can come to sex ed and we can talk about ideology all we want. K through 3, yeah, I mean, I don't see any reason why it should be pushed. Now, that being said, is this the main thing that I would want to focus on? No. And like you said, Disney...
Again, then call out your side for focusing on it exclusively. If that's not the main thing you think the right wing should be focusing on, then that's good. But guess what? It is the main thing they're focusing on. It is dominating the entire discourse on your side of the political spectrum. So again, maybe you should call that out. If you agree that it's bigoted to call trans and gay people groomers and to call them predators, then call it the fuck out in no uncertain terms. Because not only is it hurting gay people, but it's also, you know, making your entire side of the political spectrum look like a bunch of bigots that refuse to disavow obviously bigoted, obviously archaic and wrong arguments.
Is roll into the bank in terms of their support for this stuff. I see, you know, it also talks to you about what their executive class is focused on. They're like, oh, my child is a pansexual, whatever, you know, your kid, you do whatever you want. But whenever they do that type of stuff, they're ignoring the fact that you have homeless Disney workers. And
they
so
want, yes,
I think on the bill itself, framing it as attacks on gays is not right.
It's true. They want to re-stigmatize anything that is not heteronormative. And so if you have individual teachers who are a problem and they're doing things that are against the law, then you go after those individual teachers.
Absolutely.
And again, remember, sex ed, however you feel about whether this should be the case or not, sex ed is already banned in Florida. So from K to 5. So this is really just about signaling like, I'm against, you know, trans ideology and I'm going to stand, you know, with the conservative base on this, framing it as a parental rights issue when really it's just all about this culture war. It's an anti-gay virtue signal bill. That's what it is. It's an attempt to re-stigmatize things that have become increasingly accepted.
Well, you know, it's dramatically popular, Krystal. It's got 63% approval in the state of Florida. And I think there's a reason for that, right? And, you know, I just think you're doing a disservice.
I will remind you that before gay marriage was legalized in America, it was not the popular position, the majoritarian position was actually anti-gay marriage. For the longest time, even Democratic candidates like Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama refused to support gay rights and gay marriage because of the fact that the polling showed about 60% of the country was against it. Obviously, it was still the right thing to legalize gay marriage. So despite the fact that I proudly consider myself a populist, sometimes, especially when it comes to social issues, sometimes the majoritarian position isn't necessarily the civil rights position, isn't necessarily the most progressive position. And this is one of those instances.
Yeah, and that's why we're here making the case and basically treading this argument. You know, Krystal does a good job, and that's why we wanted to throw this up.
Service to it by saying it's anti-gay because 55% of Republicans support gay marriage.
Do you think that ultimately there's going to be an issue if you have a straight teacher who's talking about their marriage in class? No,
I don't.
Of course not.
I also don't think though that a gay teacher.
But if you have a gay teacher talking about their same-sex partner, do you think that's much more likely to face a lawsuit ultimately and somebody be accused of like, oh, you're grooming children or whatever ridiculous?
More likely,
because
yes.
They want to push it outside of mainstream and make it like, this is weird and deviant and this is the norm and the standard.
I think if it happened to a gay person, I would speak out against that. And that's why I think that the law is, you know, badly drafted and stupid largely. But look, what I wish we were fighting about is whether the school district gets more funding or not. Like,
well, I think that's a good way to close it because ultimately, if you are a parent, a public school parent, as I am, the thing that you probably should be most concerned with is the cuts to public education.
What's the math budget?
Right, exactly. And those things never seem to get very much attention. You'll have people flooding into school board meetings over some vaguely worded law. Part of why we're
again, the debate's basically over. But if Saagar believes what he said, which is that I wish we were focusing on something else, then again, you need to call out your side, the right wing, for exclusively focusing on this issue, for exclusively making their political message one that LGBT people are groomers and predators. That's something that you should call out as a right winger, as someone that's on the right political side of the spectrum. That's something you should call out if you want the conversation to change. And here you're basically just defending it instead of doing that. So I think that's a little bit contradictory. And I think Krystal was 100% correct to call this a moral panic. That's exactly what it is. Of course, you can cherry pick a few very fringe and cringy instances of some over the top, school teacher going too far. That does happen. And no, do I think that third graders or kindergartners should be taught about like, pansexuality and the gender spectrum. No, I think that should be, I think that should be introduced a little bit later down the line or by the parents. But again, to say that this is like some huge issue, to cherry pick these examples, blow it up out of proportion, and act like this is a serious issue that needs to be legislated out of existence is absolutely insane, in my opinion, especially given the fact that what's actually being spread in schools, especially in places like Florida and places like Kansas, where I grew up, it's not a pro-gay agenda. It's a pro-Christian agenda. The Christian right has a stranglehold on the education system in states like Florida and, like I said, Kansas, where I grew up. And by the way, I very rarely have ever heard a pro-gay argument or a pro-LGBT argument from any of my teachers in school. What I did hear was a lot of homophobia, explicit homophobia, as well as explicitly, anti-evolution arguments, anti-atheism arguments, anti-Muslim arguments. I grew up surrounded by Christian propaganda, Christian right-wing extremist propaganda, which was in fact propagated by my public school district that I attended. Many teachers, indoctrinated, so to speak, their kids, including me, with this message. Luckily, I rejected it. But again, it's so disingenuous, so dishonest to say that, oh, it's left-wing propaganda being spread in schools. Oh, it's pro-gay propaganda. It's pro-trans propaganda. If anything, it's the opposite.
100%.
Anyway, that's probably a wrap on that segment. Like I said, it seemed like they basically finished up the debate. But, despite the fact that I disagree with Saagar massively, and despite the fact that we've, in no uncertain terms called out our areas of disagreement here, I still am glad they did this segment. It might have even changed Saagar's mind, because by the end of that segment, he definitely seemed a little bit more sheepish in his resolve than at the beginning. So props to Krystal for bringing, the strong argument against this insidious, bigoted legislation and discourse going on in states like Florida and much of the right wing. Huge props to her for doing that. Great discussion.